Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guests today are Evan McFarlane and Joe Ticotsky, hosts of Mick and T's Sports Report. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Now, I know that you live in Connecticut, Joe. Evan, you're here in St. Andrews, but you've been doing a show through the pandemic together. So explain a little bit about how it's been working, having you in two different countries. I guess this is the first time you've been together in about a year and a half.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a long distance relationship for sure. Fortunately, I'm used to those now with my girlfriend and PEI. But honestly, it's probably helped our show. Like we were pretty close to just pulling the pin. I mean, we did our first 4 or 5 episodes in the studio here, and then we go, well, let's try it on Zoom, see how it goes. For us, it's been pretty beneficial. I think we've been able to get a lot bigger names than we'd be able to get here because you don't have to drag them in. We kind of do our sessions according to whatever time the guest is available, and that's been a massive help.
Yes, I mean it really has opened up the guest window, because we've had people from British Columbia through the middle of the country, and that obviously would not have been possible. And we certainly didn't, after we'd done 3 or 4 shows and then COVID hit, we did have to backtrack a little, and I didn't even know what Zoom was at the point. It was an old TV kids show for those of us back in the day called Zoom, but it really just helps make the show so much easier.
That has been weird. We found that too at CHCO, just based here, that everyone's had this crash course in Zoom, so really no one has an excuse for not being able to do it. So it does help with guests that way. But how did the two of you originally meet, you being in Connecticut?
Well, quick story. I had come up for a winter music festival in Fredericton in 2014, had never been to the province. And I emailed the person that ran the festival. I said, is there any detour I could take for a day while I'm up there? He said, St. Andrews is a nice little town. It'll be dead in the winter, and he was accurate. So I emailed, being a basketball coach, I emailed the athletic director. He invited me up to a practice and then said he was going to start running a basketball camp that summer. And that's where I met Evan, and then the athletic director left, so I took over the camp. And Evan and I have been friends since then, and we were just sort of watching different shows and things like that, and we said, well, why don't we just try a sports show? And Rob Patry, the late Rob Patry, had me on the show with Brandon Sherrod about our camp, and I sort of loved the way he did, sort of a little Letterman kind of thing, and the show's evolved. In the beginning, it was pretty much all sports, and then we realized that could be a little bit boring for people that aren't diehard sports, so we added our humor to it and music spotlights and little different. I quiz him on TV shows all the time, and he's so young that he doesn't even know any of them.
It's not going well. It's not going well at all.
And so, people also know you here in town from the Algonquin Golf Course. You're an assistant pro there, so your sports background is all over the board.
Yeah, so actually when Joe and I first met, I have no basketball background before Joe and I met. So our mutual friend that put us in touch to each other, I was actually coaching golf and a bit of hockey at the time. And he said, are you interested in coaching basketball? I'm like, I don't know anything about basketball. He's like, yeah, but you'll pick it up. Like, you can either coach or you can't coach. And then I thought about it a little bit. I'm like, you know what, this seems like a good challenge. So I read a lot and watched a lot of videos. And now I think coaching basketball has become more exciting to me, I think, in a sport, just because I really it's constant learning for me, and we're trying different things and we're doing things that aren't normal in a normal basketball game, because honestly I don't know the difference. So that's we kind of got that, that was a conversation that happened so quickly with our mutual friend that had I have not shown up that day to drop something off at the school, we probably wouldn't have met anyway.
And how did you get started as a basketball coach? What was your background, Joe?
I just always loved it growing up, and played some low-level basketball. And then when I was in college at the University of Connecticut, a friend and I went to the local YMCA, and they had a youth league there, and we started coaching. And then I moved from that to high school, and then I've run a AAU girls basketball club for 34 years now. So that was, sort of a lifelong love of the sport, and you turn it, as you advance, you turn it into the areas that hopefully you can provide some good stuff for kids.
And you're a basketball coach here in St. Andrews as well at Sir James Dunn Academy, Evan. But have you seen, since the basketball camp started here, I remember talking to you, Joe, once, and Brandon, who plays professionally in Finland now. You were
Yes.
saying at the time that I met him, he played in Italy, and I wondered if you noticed a difference when you started camp here, and talking about sports and how the idea that sports can be just such a part of our growth as people. But have you noticed that the skill level has changed just from having that interest in those?
Big time.
Yeah.
Certainly has. Yeah, when I first started, it was kind of coming into that rebuild where let's make basketball relevant, and we had a couple strong years, and then recently in the last couple of years we've had some of the best basketball we've ever played in this town. But I mean, if you think of people in town like Sam Anstey, who's gone on and he's played at university, like that just didn't happen. Like basketball was kind of the shoulder season sport that if you didn't play hockey, maybe you tried basketball. So we have seen a lot of kids now that are showing up. They've practiced over the summer. We've got a couple girls in town who go to basketball in New Brunswick in the summertime. So the skill level, I think, has gotten significantly better. But it's almost a culture that's coming back here that just wasn't here for so long.
I'll ask both of your opinion on this too. When you take a team like the Toronto Raptors, and they're not just a city team in Canada, they're like they're our only basketball team, so they really are this passion of all Canadians. Has something like that, and I'd love both your American and Canadian perspective on this changed interest in basketball in Canada, just having a team that's now won the NBA title.
Yeah, I think, and Evan always sort of tells me what it's like up here, and it's almost like during the Olympics in the U.S. where everyone is rooting for the country, and with Toronto being the only professional men's team here, it definitely is sort of like an all-for-one type thing. And you look at the ratings of like percentage of people that watched some of the finals, and you're like, that's unheard of. Yeah.
And if you look at the kind of the culture shift that's happened in Canada since the Raptors, I mean, you think back, we had that Vince Carter era, but you can see the trickle-down effect of that with the Canadian men's team being so strong now, and then having like someone like Aaliyah Edwards who plays down at UConn. There's just players that weren't like, it's almost like there was the relevance before him. It was just what didn't happen. So now, I mean, a healthy men's Canadian team, I think, could do some damage at the Olympics if we can keep all of them healthy.
And I kept telling him that it's so much warmer in the gym in the winter than at a hockey rink. That's one of the perks.
Now, are you a fan of hockey, and do you guys agree on what your favorite teams are?
He's the hockey man. I just make fun of his hockey allegiance to the Maple Leafs.
Yeah, no comment.
And what about other sports in terms of what you talk about on the show? Does it run the gamut? Do you cover everything?
I mean, we're trying to do different things. I think that's kind of the challenge of it, is we are trying to find different people that are going to attract more viewers as well. So maybe we don't know much about the sport. There's been a couple that we've had to do a bit of researching on, and they've been talking, and we're like, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we've had someone from curling, a horse racing jockey, lacrosse, a baseball executive, radio announcers, newspaper people.
Marathon runner.
Yes, some of those that was just in the recent Olympics. She was a marathon runner she's from Vancouver. So we try to appeal to different sports and expand our horizons also.
And on that note, what have been some of your favorite guests in the past year or so, especially that you've opened it up via Zoom and been able to reach people?
I mean, that's Zoom is the big thing. That we wouldn't have got these people without Zoom. I think if you look at our highlights, I mean, Cabby was probably one. Dan Patrick definitely up there. That's huge. Like Nav, the super fan, that was pretty incredible. I remember when that interview finished and we hit the stop record button on Zoom, we both just kind of sat there and we're like, what just happened? It was amazing.
Yeah, we're in other areas you wouldn't think. Like we interviewed a girl who goes to Yale that's from Toronto and plays on the hockey team there, and she was fabulous as an interview and just really personable. And so we do try to go with the Canadian bent of it, like because there are a lot of Canadians that are playing in college in the U.S. But I'd say probably Dan Patrick was at ESPN for 15 years and lives in Connecticut, and I found him that his wife owns an ice cream shop about 30 minutes from me, so that's how we sort of made the connection. And it is, like I said, without Zoom, it absolutely would not have been possible at all.
I'm going to get philosophical for a second, so bear with me.
Sure.
But what do you think, why do we still care about sports as we get older? In a way, it's still playing, and yet we all care so much about different teams, about different sports. What do you think it is about the appeal of any sport that stays with us through our lives?
Right now, honestly, I think in these COVID times, it's almost an escape mechanism. Like, I mean, I watch every Toronto Maple Leafs game and I'm miserable for 3 hours while I do it, but at the same time, you're not thinking of the other garbage that's going on throughout the day, and it's kind of that escape. You can draw your energy to something a little more, well, positive usually, but that's what I use it to. I mean, I don't try to relive the glory days when I was young. Those days are long gone, but yeah.
I try to care less as I get older because you get so miserable when you get tied in, but I still, I think it's like the human aspect. Like, you'll hear a story about a person and what they overcame, and just even like we both coached up here, and just kids that in school wouldn't hang around each other, and they become friends through the sport. And that could be whether you're in a drama club or you're in a school band or something like that. And I think it's that team aspect that sort of appeals. And the escape factor, like during COVID, is there really wasn't a lot else to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm actually going to talk to a girl I played basketball with in high school, which is many a decade ago, later on today, and that really was my family in high school was the team I played with. But then I look at a sport like golf, Evan, and that is your profession as an assistant pro. It's a sport that you can take with you through life. You don't sort of look back on your 20s and say, oh, that's the height. You can be your best game, in your later years.
Yeah.
What does golf mean to you? My dad was a golf pro growing up, so he always liked that test against the self, that it's always you versus you in some ways.
And that's kind of what happened to me. I played it a bit when I was younger, not like I wasn't that great at it. I was a hockey player growing up, so once I turned like 19 and then there just wasn't as many options for hockey, I started playing golf, and then I actually got away from it a little bit. So my recent comeback was kind of due to health issues and just going back to something that I actually enjoyed doing. And I'm probably playing the best golf of my life. I mean, I'm not incredible by any means, but I mean, I've accomplished, I've turned pro, so I'm happy with that. I really don't have to play well ever again, but I've gone to a couple tournaments and play half decent. But yeah, that every day, I don't go out there every day and say, I'm just going to go and slap it around. Like, you've got goals and you want to have your best score, and it's just, I've always said to people, like, you can always get better. Until you shoot 18 on 18 holes, there's room for improvement, so.
Fair enough. And both of you being coaches as well, can I ask you a little bit about how you've had to pivot in the pandemic? Obviously, the basketball camp has taken a bit of a hiatus due to COVID, which is one thing, but then we are still playing sports in schools now. So how has it worked, and how have you managed dealing with that at the same time as trying to do something that's team-oriented?
Well, I think down where we are, it's changed a lot more just because we've been hit so much harder. And I've been telling the people up here since I've been visiting, and they're surprised at it, that last season and probably this season, the kids are going to have to wear masks while they're playing basketball and volleyball, and for a variety of reasons. Like they don't check for the vaccines, whereas here it's mandatory if you're going to play a high school sport. So it definitely has been. I noticed that kids have gotten better because they're used to just playing games, and now when they were on their own, they were able to practice more, improve their skill levels, and sort of get back to the basics and not that rat race of just going to tournaments, games nonstop. So I think the level, oddly enough, has risen.
Oh, that's actually really interesting. There's a lot of just shooting foul shots.
Yeah,
I can attest to that. Last year we played one game, had a great game, and then they shut down games for the rest of the year. But they didn't shut down practices. So we're like, you know what, we'll use this season as kind of like a 4-month development camp. And I think you're right. I think the skill, you could take kids that needed to focus in certain areas, and you've got 3 hours a week to help them do that. So we'll see. We start next week. We'll see if it paid off or not.
That's interesting. I didn't think of it that way, that you'd think that it would have the reverse effect
Yeah,
of what maybe it
certainly
does.
huge challenge to keep the kids focused, knowing that there isn't games to play. I think you have to get pretty creative in what you do, because it's easy to say, let's go shoot 100 free throws. Well, who wants to do that if you know it's all for nothing? But we've been pretty lucky here. I think kids are challenging themselves to get better, which certainly makes my job easier.
When you're coaching, what are the skill sets that make a good coach? Sometimes it's not always. I'm still very attached to my high school basketball coach. She was actually quite an instrumental figure in my life, just in terms of the role she played for all of us on the team. But for you, what do you think it is that separates a good coach from mediocre?
Oh, I would say adapting, because I know when I started coaching, 30 years ago, it was a different era, and things you could say to kids that you look back at and say, oh my God, I
big
can't.
time.
So I think it's adapting to the kids, but still letting them know that there are going to be standards that you have, and that those things don't change over the years, and discipline, and I think those are important.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate. I haven't really had any issues with disrespect from players. Like I've always had. I think just being a local guy helps me a lot. I mean, I don't have a basketball background, so usually the kids have understood, like, I'm doing this for them. Like, I have no kids on the team. Like, it's all volunteering. I'm not getting paid, despite what people think. But no, it's good. I mean, adapting is huge. You have to, and you kind of have to gauge what your target is. I mean, last year I went from coaching all boys, so that we went into this development camp for the winter, and I took the girls as well. So, I mean, that was an eye-opener for the first week. I mean, it wasn't bad, it was just different. You have to kind of watch how you go about your business, and I think it was good for me as a person as well as it was for them.
And what do you think in terms of life skills? There is a foundation that is created in you when you play sports. What do you think it brings to people's lives? What do you see it bring to a lot of the people's lives that you coach? In terms of who they become as adults?
Yeah, I think discipline right off the bat, time management, because you do have to, get your schoolwork in. Some kids are working part-time jobs, so I think, from that standpoint, and you get along, you learn to be humble. I remember my first year when I came up here to coach with Allison Cross, and everyone's like, oh, here's the American that supposedly has coached basketball his whole life, and we were getting drilled. And I'll never forget, it was like 40-5 at halftime, and I walked off the court to the locker room, and Mr. O'Leary, the principal, was standing there, and I'm saying to myself, this guy's standing here thinking, you're the one that's supposed to know basketball. But really, you do see the kids advance, and like I said, since I've been up here, all those girls are now at the end of their college or university, and I've gotten together with a couple of them, and you see the guys and the parents around town, and it does, I mean, this is a small community anyway, but it is neat to sort of walk into a store and have someone say, you're the basketball coach, aren't you? And it's sort of like Hoosiers.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of try to take that philosophy too. Like talking to the kids, like, you know what, it's basketball, but in the end, it's just basketball. Like, we're in a small town. When you're out there on the floor, you got to remember, this small town is watching you. Like, you're in a spotlight. You're wearing the school crest. So let's not make it about ourselves. Let's make it about the team. Let's make it about the town, about the school crest. And I think that approach has worked for the most part.
Now, Joe, I want to ask, what's the future of not just your show, now that we see you in person, after a year and a half of I've been seeing you on a screen myself as well. What's the future of the show? Will you continue to do it from Connecticut and you here, Evan? And also, will the basketball camp be coming back potentially next
we're
summer?
hoping that from everything we've heard, we should be able to run the camp this summer. So hopefully that won't be an issue. The show, I think we're probably going to continue. There are really so many things that we can do on our own using Zoom, right down to a little cheat sheet on your laptop, so for a little background notes. So I think it's a pretty decent product, and as it is, Patrick is just so bombarded with the amount of shows that all of you guys do here, that if we can just slap something together and send it off to you and edit it and go from there. So I think we'll probably continue with that. I mean, we may do something when I'm up in the summer, an interview here or there, but it seems to be working.
Well, I think you're a model for people at home. If you're watching at home and you're interested in doing your own show, you guys are great representatives of two people who have taken the reins on doing your own show and produce something that you love. Do you have ideal guests in mind or hopeful guests in the next year or so? What would be a big score?
Yeah, we don't want to release too much information ahead of time. We're working on some good ones. I guess we can say
tease
that.
Tease the audience. We're trying to get the girl that scored the winning goal in the soccer Olympics for Canada. They won the gold medal, and she goes to the University of Texas. So we're trying to get her on the show. There are various media people that ideally you'd like to try to get. It's just a matter of timing, in season, out of season. But I don't know if there's a specific person that we would. Barack Obama, talk sports. Talk sports with him.
Probably around March, so you can do my bracket for me for March Madness. Yeah.
So the girl who scored the goal in the Olympics, the soccer. You're saying, okay.
Yes.
Which was, I think, I don't play soccer. I've never played soccer. I did cry. That was very, very emotional. What are some of the moments this year? I know Tom Brady just had his 600th touchdown, which I'm sure is emotional for football fans.
Especially a Pats fan.
Anything you're looking forward to in terms of just the general sports seasons ahead?
Well, for me, probably college basketball, because I went to the University of Connecticut, and their men's and women's teams are great, but last year they didn't allow fans at all, so this year they're letting fans back. So I think sort of that experience, being live in a big arena, so I think that's probably what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm a college guy too, but I'm not being from Canada, I do a lot of Canadian sports. I used to work a little bit at UMB for them. We've got a pretty strong hockey team. Last year was looking good. They won their first game at Nationals and we're getting ready to go to the semifinals, and then they shut the tournament down. So teams come back strong again this year. I'm really looking forward to getting up to Fredericton, watching a couple games.
What's it been like? I mean, there's been games we've watched with no fans. It's been a weird time, and every level of our lives have felt it, including sports. What's it been like to follow it and to be reporting on it in a time like this? Has it changed what it means to you? And has you had any out-of-body moments where you're like, this feels like the post-apocalypse? I sometimes have those when you don't hear the fans.
When you watch all the games with the cardboard cutouts they had in the stands, that was odd.
I mean, when I think of something like that, you think of like Seattle Seahawks in the NFL, where they have like the 12th man. Their crowd is supposed to be such a huge factor in the stadium, so you lose that aspect of the game pretty much right away.
Have you been back as fans now that it's starting to allow for, I know in the States that you're saying it's almost back to capacity a lot of places?
Yeah, I still have not gone to any sporting events live, and I'm sort of a little hesitant to go to like an arena with 15,000 people and but no, I have not.
No, I haven't either. But I mean, around here, stuff's just starting to pick up again.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the Quebec Major Junior League out of St. John, and I've toyed with, but I'm the same idea. I mean, both of us kind of have poor immune systems, so we're a little bit weary on where we go, and I don't think personally I'm quite ready for it.
Fair enough. Was it, I must imagine it was sort of, I haven't used my passport I just realized it's about to expire because I haven't used it. I'm used to using it at least once a week in this part of the world. Was it an emotional experience just coming back here and crossing a border that has been closed?
It was sort of emotional till the border guards just started grilling me over everything, and I'm like, there goes the emotion. This would have been such a sentimental moment, but it sort of is. You start seeing the signs again, and you realize. And I'd been up here about 2 months before everything shut down, but still, it's almost 2 years, and you see your first Tim Hortons, and you get a little teary-eyed.
Are you following COVID's impact on sports in general? I mean, we're looking at some players right now who just are not getting vaccinated, making that choice. I mean, sometimes you just look at it from a financial point of view of players losing almost $500,000 a game. Just is that having an impact on you too?
I'm baffled by it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, everybody's got their rights and reasons to do things, so I guess we can't really judge on that end. But I think, in my perspective, if you're going to give me $400,000 a game, you can put whatever you want in my system.
We are almost out of time, so I'd just love to hear any little teasers you can give us for what's next on Mick and T's Sports Report. Anything in the lineup for the next couple episodes?
Well, the next one, we're going to have Pete Walker, who is the pitching coach for the Toronto Blue Jays, and he's from Connecticut, and his daughter actually played basketball for our club just recently, so we made a connection there, and he's going to be nice enough to talk about the World Series and the Blue Jays and all that.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to run an event at the golf course this summer, a FAM event, where we brought in some big writers from across the country, and one of the gentlemen who was there, his name's Lauren Rubenstein. He's worth looking up if you haven't heard of him before, but he has wrote a lot of big books. Recently, one was a biography on Tiger Woods, where he actually just sat in his apartment after, this was before a Tiger's car crash, so it was a little while ago, but like kind of talking about how he's rehabbed with his back injuries and stuff like that. It's a pretty cool read, so he's going to jump on and talk with us, but really interesting guy.
Just wondering too, do either of you have any favorite sportscasters? Who do you watch when you want to watch other people talk about sports?
Well, I liked Marv Albert.
Of course.
And I do a bad imitation of him. He retired, so he was sort of the gold standard. And I'm lucky being close to New York, which is the media center. But I mean, Dan Patrick was just phenomenal. I've become a fan of his show since we had him on, and so I would say those are two guys I could think of.
Yeah, and I guess we can look at it that way for sure, where you respect those guys big time for what they do with sports and being a little more serious about it. The guys that I think now that I kind of look at a little bit and try to incorporate like a Jay Onrait from TSN, where they're kind of doing goofy things at the same time, and maybe you're getting an audience that isn't just sports. Like the guys are just hilarious on their own, so you're going to tune into that, and sports just happens to be their platform.
Well, that's a great. My sister, who is not a sports fan, and I would say, "Did you watch our last episode?" And she said, "Yeah, well, except for the sports parts." But that is why we did try to do like the music spotlight. We try to highlight Atlantic Canadian groups and groups from Canada that people may not have heard of. So you do try to, like with anything, you try to appeal to as many people as you can.
All right, well, I hope from just doing the sit down that we get a little crossover spill, that more people will check out your show.
Absolutely.
Thank you both for being here today. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thanks.
It was a
I
blast.
really appreciate what you and Patrick and the whole station do. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. You're a part of the team. My guests today have been Evan McFarlane and Joe Ticotsky of Mick and T's Sports Report. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.